What if the greatest threat to a nation's revolution did not come from foreign powers, but from the very brothers sitting at the same table? Tonight, we turn our eyes to Burkina Faso, a land that has carried the weight of hope and betrayal in equal measure. It is September 5th, 2025. While headlines in Washington and Paris speak about Captain Ibrahim Traoré's battles with Western powers, something far more devastating has unfolded inside his own government. A scandal of betrayal, theft, and greed. Documents leaked at midnight revealed that some of Traoré's most trusted allies had stolen nearly $50 million, money meant for schools, hospitals, and water wells. And for the people of Burkina Faso, who have endured poverty, war, and sacrifice, this betrayal feels like a wound deeper than any attack from abroad. For many of you watching tonight, men and women across America, many in your 60s or older, you've seen enough history to know that the worst kind of betrayal does not always come from enemies. Sometimes it comes from those who promise to stand with you. Perhaps it reminds you of moments in your own lifetime when leaders failed their people, when trust was broken, and families paid the price. Here is why this story matters. It is not just about a small African nation most news anchors ignore. It is about the universal question of integrity. Can a leader stand firm when the very people closest to him betray the cause? Can dignity survive when greed eats away at the revolution? And before we go any further, I want to ask you something simple. If this story already stirs something in your heart, if you believe that betrayal from within is always more dangerous than enemies outside, then let us know in the comments where you are listening from, because tonight's story will test that truth. Stay with me, because what I'm about to reveal is not just another headline. It is the most shocking act of betrayal in Traoré's government since he took power in 2022. And what follows will determine whether Burkina Faso's revolution survives or collapses from within. On the night of September 4th, 2025, just before midnight, an anonymous flash drive was delivered to Radio Omega, Burkina Faso's most trusted independent station. Inside were 2,847 classified documents, financial records, bank transfers, property deeds, and even private communications. Together, they revealed a crime so vast, so deliberate, that it shook the foundations of Captain Ibrahim Traoré's government. The numbers were staggering. Nearly $50 million, 49.9 to be exact, was siphoned away from programs designed to give children classrooms, farmers electricity, and hospitals medicine. It was not foreign interference. It was not Western propaganda. It was theft, carried out by the very officials who sat beside the president, the ones the people were told to trust. 7 senior leaders were named in the leak. Colonel Borma Sanfo, Traoré's childhood friend, accused of diverting $12.7 million from rural development. Dr. Fatou Kamporé, the Minister of Economy, accused of inflating road budgets and pocketing nearly $9 million. Major Ibrahim Sawadogo, who oversaw presidential security, accused of stealing more than $6 million from military equipment funds. The list went on, each name heavier than the last, each betrayal deeper than the one before. But it was not just about stolen cash. The documents outlined exactly how the money was taken. 4 carefully designed schemes, built not in haste, but in calculation. The first was ghost projects. Entire villages listed as having received solar power, roads, or water wells. Yet not a single installation existed. Colonel Sanfo alone had reported 67 electrified villages, but investigators found nothing but darkness. The second was inflated contracts, real projects, but with budgets bloated 3 or 4 times their actual cost. The difference quietly slipped into personal accounts. A $2 million road became an $8 million contract, with the extra $6 million vanishing into foreign shell companies. The third scheme was supply chain theft. Officials purchased medical equipment or construction materials from companies secretly owned by their own families. A machine worth less than $1 million was bought at triple the price, the markup pocketed as profit. And finally, payroll fraud. Hundreds of ghost employees added to government roles, teachers who never existed, nurses who never treated a patient, soldiers who never carried a rifle. Salaries, more than $5 million worth, transferred each month to accounts controlled by corrupt officials. Every stolen dollar had a human face behind it. Children still studying under trees because classrooms were never built. Mothers traveling miles to find medicine that was never delivered. Farmers promised electricity who still sit in the dark. For the people of Burkina Faso, betrayal was no longer an idea. It was visible in every unpaved road, every empty clinic, every dry well. One teacher, a woman named Sarah, told reporters, "We were promised books, classrooms, and better pay. We waited 3 years. Now we find the money was stolen by the very people who shook our hands." Her words echo beyond Burkina Faso. They echo to anyone who has ever trusted a promise, only to be deceived. But the question remained, how did these men believe they could get away with it? And what would happen once Captain Traoré himself discovered the truth? Because in a land where betrayal cuts deeper than invasion, exposure is never the end of the story. It is only the beginning. The discovery did not come by accident. It was late August when Chinese and Russian partners quietly reported that equipment they had delivered, tractors, generators, medical supplies, was missing from official inventories in Burkina Faso. Either the shipments had vanished or the records had been falsified. For Captain Ibrahim Traoré, the suspicion was enough. He ordered a full audit, not by his own ministries, but by independent investigators from Mali and Niger, allies he trusted more than his own staff. Within 72 hours, the truth was undeniable. The missing goods were not errors. They were stolen. The funds were not misfiled. They were diverted. And the culprits were not distant bureaucrats. They were the very men and women he had called brothers and sisters. On September 1st, Traoré gathered the accused in a closed meeting. Witnesses describe his face as both heartbroken and furious. His words cut like steel. "You have destroyed 3 years of work in 3 months of greed. You have given our enemies the weapon they could not create themselves. You have stolen not just money, but the trust of our people and the future of our revolution." The room was silent. Some tried to deny it, claiming the documents were forgeries planted by Western intelligence. Others blamed clerks or technical errors. But Traoré held the files in his hand, signed contracts, bank transfers, property deeds. He asked one simple question: "Are you claiming the West forged your own handwriting? Did they open accounts in your names, buy land in your names, and steal money in your names?" The betrayal was laid bare. For Traoré, it was worse than any drone strike, worse than any embargo, worse than any foreign pressure. It came not from outside, but from the men who had eaten at his table, who had sworn oaths to his people, who had sung the same songs of liberation. And while leaders argued behind closed doors, the ordinary people of Burkina Faso were already paying the price. In Koudougou, Sarah the teacher stood before her students in an empty lot where a school should have been. For 3 years, she promised them classrooms, books, and hope. Now she was forced to tell them the truth, that the money had been stolen. Her voice cracked. How do we explain this to our children? How do we tell them our own leaders betrayed us? In a dusty village near the border, 67-year-old farmer Ibrahim waited for electricity that never came. Officials had once held a ceremony promising solar panels for his community. They even brought papers to prove the project was complete. But the lights never turned on. When he learned the truth, his anger was sharper than grief. This is worse than colonialism. At least the colonizers admitted they were stealing. These men stole while calling themselves our brothers. By the second day, the scandal was not just about numbers. It was about broken faith. Families who had prayed for medicine buried loved ones who never received it. Students walked miles each morning to sit under trees instead of classrooms. Soldiers went into battle without proper equipment, while ghost soldiers drew fake salaries. For Traoré, the confrontation with betrayal was not a choice. It was survival. If he ignored it, the revolution would rot from within. If he acted, he risked tearing apart his own government. But as one elder in Ouagadougou put it, a house with termites cannot stand. Better to break the walls and rebuild than to let the roof collapse on all our children. And so, the battle against betrayal began. Yet exposure was only the first step, because once the guilty were cornered, they did not surrender. They launched their own desperate counterattack, an effort to cover their tracks, manipulate the media, and even twist religion itself to escape justice. The scandal had reached its climax, but the war for truth was only beginning. When betrayal enters government, it is never just about numbers in a ledger. It is about human lives that are quietly broken by missing dollars and empty promises. In Burkina Faso, the cost of corruption was measured not in luxury cars or foreign bank accounts, but in classrooms never built, medicines never delivered, and wells left dry. 12,000 students were left without proper classrooms because school funds vanished. Some studied under trees, others in abandoned buildings, waiting for walls that would never rise. Teachers, already underpaid, went 8 months without salaries, while ghost employees, names that never existed, received steady paychecks. For a nation that had fought to restore dignity through education, this was more than theft. It was the theft of the future. In the health sector, over 180,000 people were denied care they had been promised. Clinics stood without equipment. Shipments of medical supplies worth millions never arrived. Mothers carried children for miles only to face empty shelves and closed doors. One doctor in Ouagadougou said, "We had patients waiting for oxygen, for basic medicine. We were told the funds were approved. Then nothing came. Now we know why. The money was in someone's pocket." Infrastructure told the same story. 156 kilometers of road remained dirt tracks, despite official certificates declaring them complete. 67 villages remained in darkness, despite reports of electrification. 45 promised water pumps were never installed, leaving 78,000 people without clean water. These were not small oversights. They were lives placed in danger, dignity stripped away, and hope stolen in plain sight. But the betrayal did not stop at stealing. The accused launched a counteroffensive, an operation they cynically called clean hands. Millions were poured into social media propaganda, spreading the lie that the corruption reports were Western disinformation. Fake testimonials appeared from rural communities praising the same officials who had robbed them. Independent journalists were smeared as foreign agents. In the halls of politics, the guilty sought protection. They met in secret with opposition leaders, offering stolen money in exchange for silence or political cover. Military officers were courted to resist any arrest orders. Foreign embassies were approached, with promises of cooperation if asylum could be guaranteed. And perhaps most dangerously, religion itself was exploited. Money was funneled to clerics who preached that the corruption scandal was an attack on Islam, framing justice as blasphemy. Fake blessings were staged in mosques. Public prayers declared the accused as victims of a foreign plot, while curses were pronounced against whistleblowers. For ordinary citizens, this manipulation was as shocking as the theft itself. One elder summed up the mood. "They stole our money, and now they try to steal our faith. If we cannot trust our leaders and cannot trust our preachers, then where do we turn?" Politically, the scandal exposed a brutal truth. A revolution can fight foreign enemies, but if it cannot police its own, it risks collapsing from the inside. Opposition figures, long marginalized, suddenly sensed opportunity. Western capitals whispered of regime change, hoping to exploit the cracks. Yet among ordinary Burkinabe, the reaction was more complex. Anger at the corrupt officials burned hot, but many distinguished between the thieves and the man who exposed them. Traore was not seen as complicit, but as courageous for refusing to hide the truth. Still, the stakes were higher than ever. Would Burkina Faso unite behind its president, or would the internal rot tear the nation apart? The choice was not theoretical. It would play out in the days that followed, on the streets, in the courts, and in the hearts of ordinary people who had to decide whether to continue believing in their revolution, because corruption had been revealed. But the next question was far more dangerous. Could justice be enforced before the nation itself unraveled? While Burkina Faso struggled with betrayal inside its own walls, the world outside was watching closely. For Western powers, the scandal appeared at first like a gift. A leaked CIA memorandum, later intercepted by African intelligence, described it in blunt terms. The corruption scandal provides perfect cover for regime change. Traoré's credibility will collapse when people realize his closest allies betrayed him. The strategy was called Operation Internal Collapse. Its first phase was to amplify division, funding media campaigns that painted Traoré as either corrupt himself or too weak to stop corruption. The second phase promised asylum and legal protection to the accused officials if they defected, turning criminals into whistleblowers. The third phase was the most dangerous, supporting clean government protests that would call for Traoré's resignation, backed by international recognition for any replacement leadership more favorable to Western interests. But what Western strategists underestimated was the resilience of Burkinabe opinion. When ordinary citizens were polled, 73% blamed the corrupt officials, not Traoré. Only 12% blamed the president himself, and nearly 90% demanded immediate prosecution, even if the accused were lifelong friends of the leader. Instead of weakening him, the exposure strengthened his image as a man willing to sacrifice personal loyalty for the sake of national dignity. Across Africa, the response was equally striking. The African Union pledged financial investigators, legal cooperation, and asset recovery programs to help Burkina Faso reclaim what was stolen. Ghana, Ivory Coast, and Togo agreed to freeze bank accounts and seize properties tied to the scandal. South Africa's president declared, "Captain Traoré's courage in exposing corruption sets a new standard for African leadership." For Americans watching, this raises a sobering question. What role does the United States play in moments like this? Is America a partner in justice or a manipulator of outcomes? Older generations remember the Cold War, when coups and interventions were justified in the name of stability, but left nations broken. The echoes are familiar today, and so the world waits. Will Traoré's integrity inspire a new African model of governance? Or will external powers succeed in twisting an act of justice into an opportunity for control? One thing is certain, this scandal was meant to destroy him. Instead, it has forced him to prove who he really is. The $50 million corruption scandal could have been the end of Burkina Faso's young revolution. It could have shattered public trust, handed victory to foreign powers, and left ordinary families with nothing but disappointment. But instead, it became something else, a defining test of integrity. Captain Ibrahim Traoré chose not to hide the truth. He chose not to protect old friends or powerful allies. He chose the people. In a single week, 7 senior officials were arrested. Bank accounts were frozen. Properties were seized. Already $23 million of stolen wealth has been recovered and redirected back to the very projects that were betrayed. Schools that stood as empty shells will now be built. Clinics that lacked equipment will finally receive supplies. Villages left in darkness will see light. For the people of Burkina Faso, the message is clear. Corruption will not be tolerated, not even among the president's inner circle. For Africa, the moment is historic. A leader who dares to expose his own government and prosecute his own allies, showing the continent that true sovereignty begins with honesty. And for the world, it is a reminder that leadership is measured not by speeches, but by choices made when the cost is highest. But we must be honest with ourselves. The battle is not over. Western capitals are still watching, still scheming, still hoping to exploit divisions. Enemies of reform do not disappear overnight. And the greatest threat to any revolution is not always an army at the border. It is the slow decay of trust within. So we end tonight with a question. Will this scandal mark the beginning of Burkina Faso's collapse, or the foundation of something stronger? History will not answer that for us. It will be written by the courage of a people and by the integrity of the leaders they choose to follow. If this story has touched you, share your thoughts in the comments. If you believe in dignity, justice, and leaders who put people before power, let these words live beyond this video. And may God bless not only Africa, but every nation searching for leaders of integrity. Because betrayal was supposed to destroy Ibrahim Traoré. Instead, it revealed exactly why so many believe he is the kind of leader Africa has been waiting for.